Striker.
Okay.
Striker wouldn't freeze.
Yeah.
Striker wouldn't freeze. They did that. The semen wasn't volatile enough to freeze. But Lipper, he did. You're right. Dr. Randall Fraley sure did collect Lipper. And here's a tidbit. Lipper was so trashy. And Hopkins would tell you that today. I was hunting with Hopkins a lot in those days.
Oh, really?
They couldn't break him off a deer.
Yeah.
My friend who's dead in his grave now called Mac Garrett. He says Mac was hunting with Hopkins helping him train Lipper. He said, I know a man in Houston will break this dog, and he won't run him. Well, Hopkins called me, and we got to talking. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll sell him to you. And those days, I had a check. I had written it for $5,000. We went to Frankston, Texas, and it was freezing as fast as time. You could spit before your spit hit the ground, it would have frozen. We had 27 dogs at that UKC hunt. The guy that owned Hickory Nut Harry, now Tim was there. Tim told him, he said, I want to hunt with the old man. I want to hunt with Guy Manning. He said, I've never hunted with him. I said, we need to hunt together before this thing is over. That guy said, what? He said, it's life. And the guy said, I can't fix the cat. I missed him. I didn't throw him. But Tim and I, we spent a lot of time together. Lipper was there, 27 dogs. Only one coon was treed out of the 27 dogs that night, and Lipper treed the coon in his cast and lost all the points but 25 by treeing armadillos. But he won first place.
Yeah.
And that made Lipper a night champion. And Hopkins changed his mind. He told me, he said, hey, I said, I'll meet you back. I came back to the ranch and hunted. Frank's was about an hour and a half from me. He said, I'll meet you back at the ranch. He called me. He said, He said, I changed my mind. So I finished tonight. I made him a night champion. He treated the only coon. Every cast was dead but Lipper's cast, and Lipper had 25-plus points. He said, I'm not hunting him in another hunt for the next 6 weeks. I'm going to break him from running the deer. And Hopkins, he was committed to what he was doing. Now, he was into his dogs. He hunted that dog for 4.5 weeks before that dog ever struck a deer. He struck a deer about the third or fourth night in the fourth week, and he run him till the next day. When Hopkins caught it, and Mac McAllister had been trying to buy Lipper, and Mac told me this out of his mouth. And Mac used to come out here, and I hunt with Mac. He'd come hunt with me some. He'd come through this country and buy decent dogs. He'd go back and sell them. But anyway, he bought Lipper. He paid $20,000 for Lipper. He said, I don't care about him running the deer. He said, I ain't gonna hunt him. Rumor had it, now Mac never verified this, but he did verify 300 plus. Rumor had it Mac bred over 500 gyps to that dog before he died. I had bought a pup out of Lipper called Grip. Hopkins told me he had him scratched twice for fighting. I met him at a parking lot at a shopping mall in Houston, up north Houston. I bought the pup without hunting him, and I said, if I can break him, you keep the check. I said, if I don't, Bob said, I'll give you money back. He was afraid to put him in a hunting. Me and a man named Jack Foley had a blue tick dog, but broke that puppy one night in the Sienna Bottom in a cornfield. We treated a coon, and he was tearing that big red dog, that big blue dog up. And when I jumped on him, all of us jumped on him. We broke that puppy. I won 7 second places, never could get a first on him. Max says, I want the best 2-year-old dog in the United States out of Lipper. And Hopkins said, well, you need to call Guy Manning in Houston. He got him. And I ended up selling that dog to Mac. Mac had him sold to a boy in Carolina. And they did real well with that dog, real well. That dog was a producer. I thought at one time Lipper would have been in my kennel, but I didn't. Just a matter of changing the check changing hands. Yes, sir.
Did you like Lipper?
He was a freak, in my opinion. He was a different style hound than that I had ever followed, and up to this day, he could be running the deer, and if that son was going to run across a coon, whether he was up or whether he had been on the ground, it wasn't going to take him long. He was going to get him treed. I bought Lipper out here on the ranch the last time I judged him out of the state championship and a Grand Night champion cast. I had a guy named Scott in the cast from Oklahoma on the dog called Cop Topper, and I had another Grand Night champion female 3-dog cast. I cut him here back in the house. And, my closest neighbor is about 1.75 miles. When that dog struck that coon, he made about 10 barks, and every light was off. People going to bed. I saw lights start popping on 1 mile, 1/2 mile, 3/4. They had never heard that was the loudest. I thought he was the loudest dog that I'd ever hunted. In 25 minutes, that sucker treated 3 single coons. And before the next hour was up, he lost all of them, but 25 points again, and won the Grand Night Champion part that night. It was a rough night. He was in the armadillo hole. Tommy tree him, we get to him, he out of there, he'd go. And then you had to minus him, you know. But, yes, I like Lipper because he was different from anything. When he went to the Futurity, I judged him the night that he got qualified to go to Futurity in Liberty, Texas. He treated 2 coons down there, another dog never opened him out, and then almost lost them all. Just about it. But he did have plus points. He won the cast and got a chance to go to Futurity that year. Sure did.
Now, and on Mr. Tom's episode, he talked about House's Lawyer being the loudest tree dog he'd ever heard.
Now, that's where I was going. He was.
Okay.
I brought him out here maybe a couple of years or so later. In the same place I hunted Lipper, because we were talking about, I said, Lipper treated his second coon. He said, I remember that place. That was probably the loudest dog. Now, I don't know that to be a fact. I never hunted with Judge, who was a black and tan dog owned by Tam Young, and an older man out from West Texas owned him at the time named Hugh Lowe. Now, I often heard by older hunters said that was the loudest dog ever drew breath. He was a black dog. They said that he would drown Lipper and Lawyer out, and that was hard for me to believe. But, yes, Lawyer was tremendously loud.
Yeah,
yes, sir, he was.
And that was what Mr. Tom was saying on when we interviewed him, or when I interviewed him for the podcast. He said Lawyer was just ridiculously loud, you know.
He was. I don't know. And you could almost look down in his digestive system when he opened his mouth, his throat opened. I just sit there and I was judging him that night. That Booker tree, the slick tree, too, had a persimmon tree, had 3 persimmons and 1 leaf on it. No coon up it. And the whole cast, we just sit there and looked at it. How loud is this dog? And we were deep in the ranch, man. You can hear that dog 2 miles, easy. Yep, I agree with Tommy. I really agree with him. He was loud.
Hey, y'all. Tyler here from Coon Hunting University. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about our great sponsor, Extreme Dog Fuel. I personally swapped to Extreme Dog Fuel about 2 months ago, and man, I've been blown away by the results. I'm going to talk to you about some of the benefits of the 30-20 real quick. It's an all-life stage formula, high percentage of available calories for canine athletes, high levels of vitamins and minerals, offer quicker recovery and healing, high-quality source of carbohydrates, maintain body condition during peak work periods, extremely palatable, and is loaded with probiotics. Extreme Dog Fuel has actually been told the minerals and the quality of the products that they put in their food is actually overkill, but they don't believe it is. It is an outstanding dog food, and I encourage everybody to check it out. Go to extremedogfuel.com and find a retailer near you today. Yeah, well, we kind of went down a rabbit hole right there, but I think it was pretty good. Right. I think it was good. It really was.
Oh, yeah, so do I. A lot of people may like to hear that, but that's a fact.
He's gone now, you know. I don't even know if there's any straws. There might be a little bit of straws left on him, but not much. But I mean, he's done did his impact, you know, over 5,000 puppies. He, you know, I mean, it's there.
Oh yes.
So.
Oh yes.
You know,
oh yes. Oh yes. Yes.
Whether they like it or not, I mean, it's there. But I mean,
it's there.
From
That's
you
right.
talking, listen to you talk, you know, and I like Mr. Tom said about Lipper, and you were saying it. Lipper was ahead of his time.
He was.
You know,
he was.
He should be hunting today.
He should.
You know,
I agree. That's right.
And
I agree 100%. And he would do well. He would do well.
And so, speaking of those type of dogs, you know, like we were talking about Lipper, he should have been hunting today. But how about all the other dogs that we were just talking about? How much of those hounds do you see in the dogs that we're hunting today, as far as like Chief and Banjo?
There's one thing you can't get away from. Of course, with PKC now, circle points or less minus points can win a cast for you. Those days, that what I heard. If you didn't have plus points or better, you were not considered a cast winner. Coon treeing is the bottom line. Jane Merchant had an old female. I'm trying to think of her name. One as much as any dog, if you go back and research. I'm trying to think of her name. She wasn't going to never get over 50 to 100 to 150 yards from you. And she was going to tree as many coons as 5 other dogs put together. It's just something about her. She had that uncanny ability that she could tree them on or off the ground. And comparing dogs in yesteryear to today, I believe dogs years ago were bred more for being able to track that game rather than explode on game now. You got a lot of dogs, and I'm not going to call any names because I don't want to offend anybody. Just they blow it, and there's nothing wrong with this. These young folk, they win with them. Them dogs blow through you, and you cut a dog loose. Where I'm sitting now, and you won't hear him for another 3 or 4 minutes, but he may be 500, 600 yards in there. Give you 3 or 4 barks, and bam, he's treed. Start to that dog, you may look at 3 or 4 or 5 coons sitting up. Now, what happened when that dog went through here? And I had dogs like the Ranger dog was like that, but I wondered how many coons did he run under, run by, or didn't hunt. I just got a dog out of Missouri, a 6-year-old dog, goes back to the line that the wipeout dogs that they derive from, the coma line, a 6-year-old dog. I've seen it too many times, dogs running through that tree and 1 or 2 coons and not hunting the woods you tell them to loose in. This old dog hunts his woods. You put him in a 40-acre patch, he's going to hunt that patch out. Another dog wouldn't even look at it. He wouldn't even hardly go through it. He'd go around and he'd be in yonder mile. Now, that's what we wanted, covering the real estate. But how much are you leaving behind? So to give an answer at my age, and to have hunted as long as I have, I kind of lean a little bit towards the older style of dog.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. You're a line breeder. You know, you were talking about breeding a Spring Creek Rock son back to a granddaughter.
Right.
You know, so when you're doing that type of stuff, you're looking to replicate traits, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Well,
you're going to duplicate and you're going to impact the good as well as the bad.
Yeah. Well, that's
why the culling process is so important. You got to cull them.
Okay. What of those traits are you looking to replicate the most in your line of dogs?
Consistency. And one would say, what do you mean by that? If I got a finished dog here in my kennel, when I cut it loose, I wanted to know, and most of the time, don't ever think, here again, we talk about dogs with sense. You hunt that dog so much, they're craftsmen after their craft. They know when you take them out of that box and you walk them to a wood line or edge of a field or road or whatever, you can see the difference in those dogs and animals, that they know when you cut them loose, you're cutting them loose to go hunting. I don't want you running cross tracks. Now, I've lost a lot of cats by them, my old dog sitting in there banging around on the track. But I'm looking for that dog can take a cold track and can move it with some degree of consistency. I'm looking for one, and this is a bad thing. We're trying to change the DNA on dogs, and this is not the way God's constructed them to be. He's constructed them and developed them as pack animals. A dog from Jump Street is a pack animal. They run in packs. But we're trying to make them individuals. We want them, what these young folk call them, deep and lonely. That's fine. But that's not the nature of a dog. But we work them and train them to the point that we don't want them with nothing. I don't mind a dog working a cold track. I don't mind a dog exploding in yonder. But if you explode in yonder and you get your track, get it to the tree and get it treed. And accuracy. I've seen too many of them in the last 25 years. They'll tree a fence post if that's why they decide to go tree and fight to stay there. But at the bottom line, at the end of the day, they don't have a game. I'm looking for a consistent dog from start to finish, from the tailgate of the truck to the tree.
Yeah.
And I think you win more hunts.
Well, what trait do you find is the hardest to keep consistent in your dogs, as far as like a mouth, a good nose?
Treeing. You can get a dog to tree. Accuracy. I'm going down the line. I'm going to give you a final answer here. But you cannot tree that coon and have him until you get that track to the tree. Am I right or wrong? Unless you run under him as a layup.
Yeah, you're right. Unless you lay him up. Yeah.
Yeah. You cannot have it. I'm looking for a dog can take a track and unravel it and get it through the country and find the right tree. Stay with it until I get there.
Yeah.
So the one trait I look for is hard to contain or hard to maintain or hard to get is their ability to track coon 2 hours, 3 hours old. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
And you got some dogs, the track break down. People say, well, he dropped it. No, he didn't drop it. He's looking for the track. He knows that. He may catch that track 100 yards above where he dropped it or where you thought he dropped it and pick it up where he can smell it and get it onto the tree. Now, I've seen some pretty nice dogs. There are some dogs on the circuit right now. It's good at that. Them young boys out of Mississippi and Alabama hunting dogs, you know. Hell, the Islands got some dogs out there I've hunted with. Old track break down on them. They'll make that circle out there. They may pick it up 100 yards from where your dog's still working in here. Now, I like that. Of course, that comes with a lot of training and work, but you've got to have that ability to do that and the sense to do it. So the one trait I look at is hard to maintain is consistency, and that includes a lot of different things.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, makes a lot of sense, really.
Well, I think it does. I've seen that too much of that come about. You know, you got a tree dog, but if you walk to 5 trees, look at 1 coon. You walk to 10 trees, look at 2 coons. So you go back to reproduction, and you know you got 100 puppies on the ground, but only one of them act like he want to be a coon dog. Nah, I don't know if you call him a reproducer or not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's a reproducer. He might not be a good one though. Anything reproduce.
Yes, sir. Yeah, well said, son. Well said, young man. You're right. Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think that's where we get it mixed up. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say any of them. Some of them do have trouble, but most of them will reproduce. Now, whether they reproduce good that's the question.
That's the question. That's right.
So, you kind of touched on it. We were talking about Lipper being ahead of his time or whatever, and then the other dogs. You said Lipper would do good in today's time, but overall, the dogs from back then or back, way back, do you believe that they're better than the dogs of today's time as far as in a competition? And I guess you could say, well, those dogs were built for a 4-hour competition back in the day, and these today are built for a 1 hour. But, kind of draw a comparison in your mind as far as overall quality of dogs from back then to today.
It's important to me for a dog to be accurate. And if I hunted 4 hours, I made a tree an hour. That's giving the benefit of the doubt. That's 4 trees. And I got 3 coons out of 4. I hunt a dog today an hour and a half, let's say 2 hours. I make 2 trees and doesn't have a coon in either tree, or I don't find one. And with technology like it is today, if he's up there, these kids hunting these infrared deals now, they're supposed to find him. I'll find some kind of heat up there. But anyway, that dog that could track in a 4-hour hunt and making 1 tree an hour, that's 4 trees as opposed to 1 hunting 2 hours, making 2 trees and no coons, or making a tree, 2 trees with 1 coon. Who's going to win the hunt?
Yeah.
Now, of course, you said, well, you had 2 more hours. Okay. I'd rather take my chances. Say I took that dog yesteryear and cut 2 of his trees off, making him, but I'm cutting 2 of his hours out as well. He makes me 2 trees in 2 hours, and this other dog makes me 2 trees in 2 hours. 1 coon versus 2. More than likely, I'm going to win that cast. Or if, say, one of the trees came, the 1 tree that the dog didn't have in the 4 hours, which I said 3 coons with 4 trees, if this dog down makes 2 trees, and he has 1 coon, it's going to be probably a jump ball. But then how did you get to that tree? Did you blow through the country and get it? See, we spend a lot of time walking now to different trees because of the way these dogs are. We spend too much time. And that's why I don't like this rule that Dale got out there, that no leash lock rule. And it's a good action-packed, it makes for an action-packed cast, Coach. But here's the thing. How many people can live up to that? I personally can't because I'm much older than most of these young folk. But I'm hearing too much debate now about this no leash lock rule we don't like it. But I didn't answer your question, and I'm not evading your question. I don't know. I think the dogs years ago had more coons. I really do. Than what we have today. Because, you win a cast now with circle points, at least minus points. But that 1 coon will knock out 2 truckloads of circle points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. And, I mean, like around here, if you tree a coon in a 1-hour PKC hunt, which I've had happen. I've treated a coon to myself and gotten beat in a 1-hour PKC hunt, and had plus points, didn't take any minus. But most of the time, if you treat 1 coon in a 1-hour PKC hunt to yourself, you're going to win.
That's true. I agree with you.
90% of the time.
Right. I agree with you.
Around here. Now,
100%.
that is not in Illinois or Indiana. That is in South Mississippi.
No, that's right. You're right.
Yeah.
You are so right.
So, do you have a favorite hound that you've hunted throughout your career, and why?
Most of my friends and the people that hunted with me, those of us who are left, and some of the younger people who've gotten in it and hunted with some of my older dogs, most of the folk that will tell me the old Rachel Jip, who was a Spring Creek Rockbred female, was probably my better dog. Well, the RJ dog was her grandson. In fact, he was out of the old rock dog I had, who was the son of Rachel. I'm going to say maybe because he was won more money for me than any other dog. Of course, Rachel didn't have the opportunity. They weren't available. The first pro hunt, the second PCA hunt they had out here, my old Rachel Jip won it. But we wouldn't have one but 1 a year out here. And it was between me and a guy called Rodney Green at the time, of course. He won the first one, and I won the second one. And I'm going to say the Rock Jr. dog was probably my favorite dog. And that included his pigling and all that, because he liked him a little pig from every now and then. But he probably treated consistently more coons on the outside than any dog I've ever owned. And the young man that called you, Wesley Young, you know Wesley? He said he called you and asked you to do this interview with me.
Yes, sir. Well, I don't know him personally, but yes, sir, he did. And I thank him for doing that. I really do.
He told me, he said, man, if you would do it for, he said, I'm going to call this guy. Because the one man that come to mind after all the years, he said, I've known you since I was a little bitty boy. In fact, he left the dog. Everybody left him in the woods one night. He was just a kid. They wouldn't go with him to get his dog. He said, you're the only man stayed with me till almost daylight. And you walked every step of the way with me to get my dog caught. He said, they need to know who's the backbone of these hunts right here. And I don't consider myself the backbone of these hunts. I just don't believe in doing anybody, whether it's a kid, whether it's a grown man or a grown woman. I don't believe in wronging anybody. Because at some point in time in life, my scripture tells me that you're going to be called into the judgment. And you're going to be asked, why did you do this? And I got enough to give him count of, but to leave a kid in the woods is unheard of. He thinks RJ is by far. He said he's in the top 5 dogs that he's hunted with in his life. And this kid now is in his 40s. He loved him some RJ. He was consistent. If he stopped, you look hard. But he thought it may be something there to look at.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'll tell a quick story that Wesley told me. You know, he told me that story about you walking with him to the tree. And then he said, I don't know, it was many years later. I don't remember how long ago he said it was, but he said your dog was in there deep, and he paid you back the favor, went in there and got your dog.
He did. Yes, sir. So he certainly did.
That's kind of
a fact.
How it comes back around, doesn't it? You know?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And it would appear this day and time is in short order.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, sir. And that's what I tell most of these guys. I was down at this hunt Joe had a couple of weeks ago down here at Buffalo. He had a big pro classic down there, which was, I think, was November 27th, right after Thanksgiving. And I was sitting there on Saturday night, and I was just kind of going over this. I hunted with a young man last week. He said, I sat there when I was talking about leopard, some of the same stuff you and I have been talking about. Got a kid named Joel Black. He said, I sat there and sucked every bit of it in. He said, I just want you to know that some people were kind of moving around, weren't paying attention. They were saying that they don't know that they missed in a lot of history about coon hunting. So I sat there and sucked every bit of it in. It was about an hour and a half, 2 hours. I stayed there and talked to all those young folk about some of how the path of this coon hunting has gone in the way of competition, even in the way of pleasure hunting. See, my first love is pleasure hunting. I'd rather pleasure hunt than competition hunt. I really would. Just love to hear, and I don't have to own the dog. I just love to hear a good animal work. He doesn't have to be a walker. She doesn't have to be a walker. But it just does me good to hear an animal doing what they were bred and trained to do, and they perfect. That tells me something about life itself.
Yes, sir.
We can't worry about what lies at a distance, but we need to take care of what lies clearly at hand. And a good dog is a good dog, and I don't take nothing from it, and I don't have to own it.
Yep, that's great advice. It really is. I mean, you can learn a lot from that. Like you were talking about, that guy was, sucking in all that knowledge that you were given. And that's one reason that I started. That's the reason, not one reason. That is the reason I started this podcast, was to be able to capture some of that and to spread it to the masses.
Well, I want to thank you, son. This podcast may be the reason coon hunting lasts another 10, 15, maybe 20, 25 years. Thank you, because I've always been a believer. The best of nothing has been done yet or said. I do believe there are greater days ahead, because I'm a believer that what he said in his word, that before his word returned to him void, heaven and earth will pass away. And he created it all, and he's not going to let no man come in and destroy and annihilate that he has created. And I believe that.
Yes, sir.
I seriously believe that.
Yeah.
Of all the things we're going through, there are some brighter days ahead.
Yes, sir.
I believe that.
I do too.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. I appreciate you for that.
Yes, sir. So we were talking about, you like to pleasure hunt, and that's your real passion. But I know that you're passionate about, well, I know for sure 2 hunts in particular. So how did the Lone Star 5000 and the Black Eye Pea Classic come about? Those are 2 huge hunts, you know.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I'd go out on a limb and say some of the biggest hunts that aren't World Hunt and Super Stakes, stuff like that, you know, huge annual hunts.
Well, I tell you, Larry Meeks told me one time, said, now look, said, now you it's kind of toned that 5,000 down. It's going to get as big as the World Hunt. Because I was wanting the purses to be up in the 20s of thousands, some kind of way to come up with a program with to attract enough people we could, give them top few dogs, $25,000, $30,000. It was just wild thinking one time. But here's how the 5,000 got started. I told you that the Winter Classic in Mississippi had run into some problems, some financial problems. Jarvis came to me and said he'd like to have us bring it out in Texas. And I was telling several of the older guys, Cleve Ferguson, Jimmy Ferguson, who's since he's deceased now, a gentleman down in Bryan named, oh boy, I can't think of his name. He's a Redbone man. Mike McCown and Snuffy Brewster. I hunted Iowa a lot, pleasure hunted, because there's some remarkable hunting. It reminds me of Indiana. I could hunt on several of the major ranches in that country. And I asked them would they be willing to host a hunt if I was able to put together a hunt like that, and we'd name it the Lone Star 5000. And they said, oh, man, we're just going to keep our regular club hunt. I said, well, now, this will be over beyond your regular hunt, your regular PKC hunt monthly. And I went to Jarvis and I asked him, and I told him, I said, most of the guys that I said, I'm supporting them. We get to run a classic into Texas, and we iron the kinks out and get it financially stable. See, what's to say you guys won't switch it back to Mississippi? And he said, well, that could be a possibility. Well, I said, well, hey, but that's not what we want. We want our own mousetrap. And he told me, he said, well, think about it. I was at the Shriners hunt. I used to go to the Shriners hunt in Louisiana. I used to go there every year. We used to auction all the dogs off for the kids. Sometimes I'd be so hoarse I couldn't talk. I'd auction 125 or 30 dogs off simply because we was raising money for those kids. And I have a great story about that. I just kind of started helping the Shriners for years. And Jarvis, I told Jarvis, I said, he was there. And I said, I met with several people from Texas. Said, we'd like to try to put our own hunt together. And I said, we don't have any money. And I asked Jarvis, I said, would you, on my own recognizance, loan me $1,500 to put this hunt together? And he says, yeah. We thought more about it. The next week or the week after, I get a check from PKC from Jarvis. He did. And he may not want me telling this, but that's how the 5,000 got started. The first year, we paid him back. The second year, that thing went from maybe about 140, 150 dogs to over 200 from that. And the third year, we was in the 300s. Because, see, I wanted to put it where in January, because up north, a lot of people are frozen in. They're looking to get loose. They're looking to come south. And we had some great hunting in our old area, in the Grimes County area. Big scores, good hunting, flat country. And a lot of people began to catch on. Well, it got so big, Curtin couldn't handle it. We moved it to Iowa. And that has been the largest payday in that little town every year. That's their largest payday annually. And we gave the concession to the FFA kids. Suppliers would come. That was one year we hunted close to 900 dogs in 3 nights. It was just getting so big. And Larry said, look, you're going to start competing with the world. I said, well, we need to cut back however way you want to do it. Well, at the time, I'd been the president for 12 years doing that, 12 or 13 years, and health had started to fail me some. And I started to relinquish responsibilities to other members. I had about 12 or 14 board of directors, and I stayed on for 5 or 6 years, on in around the 20th year to help them with advice and with raising money, and even to this day, I help Joe whenever he tells me he needs this, I help him. That's how it got started. The Black Eye Pea, I was going to Russ Myers' hunt. Russ and I have been friends for a long time. Even we hunted together years ago, man, when it was just the old ACHA hunt. And Myers and I kind of developed a relationship. I respected him, and I think hopefully he respected me. He told me he's having this hunt every year. Well, at the time, 16 dogs. It was invitational only. It wasn't sanctioned. But he would only invite people that he knew he wouldn't have a problem with, because they didn't have no vehicle built to, chastise people. And he knew I didn't want to be around anything that was going to be a lot of mess going on. I didn't like that. He said, no, it's good. He said, I got a 2,000 acre plus ranch up there. We have it on my ranch, and he does have a fine facility. And that man had some of his finer food as you wanted. He said, just, I don't have any interest. I mean, in the openings now. He said, as soon as I get an opening, I'm going to let you have it. I'll let you have it. Well, I got a friend across the creek over here.